Well, thank you, Rob. And it's really a great pleasure to be asked to introduce Hunter Hoffman, Dr. Hunter Hoffman. I've known Hunter for, oh, gee, Hunter, probably more than 15 years. And I've always viewed you as really the founder of the field when it comes to VR and pain issues, but also you're a major figure when it comes to VR, post-traumatic stress, and a few other areas. Um, you're the director of the Virtual Reality Research Center at the Human Photonics Lab at the University of Washington, Department of Mechanical Engineering in Seattle, and you're affiliate faculty at the University of Washington Departments of Radiology and UW Department of Psychology. And I know you're a very, very busy person. So excited to hear about your pioneering work, bringing us up to speed on what you're working on lately, but also I hope you trust upon some of the foundational work that you used to start to kick the field off with. So very happy to have you here with us, Hunter.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. So I want to introduce, and thanks to Dr. Lewis. So here you see some of the other people on our team. Of course, a big interdisciplinary team that's a collaboration between the VR researchers and the medical providers. Dave Patterson and Walter Meyer in particular. Next slide, please. And the NIH.
I was on fire. I couldn't see to unbuckle my seatbelt or open the door. I believe my guardian angel just took me out of the truck.
First Lieutenant Samuel Brown survived an attack on his Humvee in southern Afghanistan, but he would then have to endure rounds of surgery, skin grafts, and painful skin stretching.
This is a battle that's going to take years to get back to being how it was prior to this.
But while Brown's body fights that battle, virtual reality technology lets his brain enjoy hurling snowballs to the music of Paul Simon. University of Washington researchers Hunter Hoffman and David Patterson designed the virtual reality game Snow World to occupy burn patients' minds during painful wound cleaning or physical therapy.
Snow World's the opposite of fire. Snowy, cold. It's supposed to cancel out and help distract them from remembering their original injury.
Their previous research showed that not only do patients report less pain in Snow World, MRI scans show it reduces the brain's pain signals. Brown's doctors see real improvement.
What we saw was marked improvement in the range of motion that we were able to achieve, and most importantly, an increased level of comfort.
As published in the Journal of Cybertherapy and Rehabilitation, the soldiers even report a fun quotient.
I spent some time growing up out in Colorado skiing during the winters and stuff, so, if anything, it sort of brings back some of those memories.
A cool escape for a war hero putting the pieces back together. I'm Brad Close.
And I just wanted to disclose I'm on the scientific advisory. Next slide, please. So this talk is, I've used virtual reality for a pretty wide range of different painful medical procedures. This talk, I'll focus on burn patients. Burn wound care is some of the most painful ever. So when the burn patients are just lying around in their hospital beds, as you can see in this graph, most patients' pain is well controlled by pain medications. Next slide. But these same patients during wound cleaning exercise, when they get their wounds cleaned, which they have to have done often on a daily basis, especially for the large burns, to clean away the dead skin that's sloughing off and keep it from getting infected. Most patients, even with strong, very powerful pain medications, most patients report severe to excruciating pain during the wound care. Next slide, please. In the late 1990s, Patterson and I started using virtual reality during wound care. Here's a patient getting staples removed from his skin graft, and the helmet was 8 pounds. You can see that helmet. So as Walter Greenleaf mentioned earlier, this system was a $90,000 VR system. There's an interesting story behind this image ending up on the cover of Pain, but I'll save that for another time. Next slide, please. So here is Snow World. This is, as you saw in the video, Snow World's specifically designed for burn patients. A lot of patients reported that the wound care reminded them of when they were in the fire, when they were burned originally. So we deliberately made Snow World to be the opposite, to take their mind away from, so they don't think about fire in addition to distracting them from their pain. So there's a lot of psychological influences that amplify how much pain the patients experience. So anxiety, expectations of pain has been shown to actually increase nociceptive signals coming into the brain. And Dr. Fields showed that in some mice studies. So the beauty is that psychological treatments can be used against the pain instead of for the pain. Next slide, please. Here's a child with Dr. Patterson and I were lucky to work with Walter Meyer at Shriners Hospital for Children in Galveston, Texas, where they treat these children with enormous burns, average burn size of 40%. A lot of these patients, 30 years ago wouldn't have survived. Now they survive, but they have to go through a lot of different painful wound care procedures. Here's a woman, nurse, doing physical therapy, skin stretching, range of motion exercises with a young child, pediatric patient. And it was pretty interesting. He took a break, and when he was coming back, he said something in Spanish. A lot of these patients are from Mexico, Central and South America, where they have really severe burns, and they bring them up to Galveston. The kid said something in Spanish. I asked the nurse, what did he say? And she translated, "Watch out, penguins." So when he was coming back to get more physical therapy, he was excited, thinking about the Snow World and not about how painful it was going to be. Next slide, please. Just one other example, with the physical therapy, we had a patient that was a rebellious teenager, and we had him do physical therapy with no VR and then with VR. After the no VR, he rated his pain. Then we put him in virtual reality for the same stretching exercise. And then we asked him to rate his pain. He threw the pain ratings across the table, and he said, "How the hell do I know what my pain was? I was in virtual reality. You guys don't know what you're doing." Next slide. Okay, so that's one of the patients from Brooks Army Medical Center in San Antonio, with soldiers with combat-related burn injuries. So a lot of the U.S. soldiers in Afghanistan and Iraq were burned from improvised explosive devices. And we did a study with combat-related burn injuries during wound care. So they did part of the wound care with VR and part without VR. And we showed big reductions in how much time you spent thinking about pain, the cognitive component. Pain and pleasantness dropped significantly, pain intensity. And one of the interesting original questions that I came up with was, how much fun did you have during wound care? Which is a pretty controversial question to be asking burn patients. And they were not happy to answer that during the no VR condition. So one guy looked up at me and he said, "Does this look like it's fun?" But interestingly, during VR, now they understand what you're doing, and most of them rated wound care was pretty fun as a surrogate measure of positive affect. Next slide, please. One challenge especially in the early century, this was around 2004, we were still using these highly electricity demanding VR systems, and we wanted to use VR in the tank room, but we were afraid to use it. So I came up with this fiber optic image delivery system. Luckily, I work at a mechanical engineering department in optical engineering. So my friends helped me design and build this. And fiber optic image delivery system with 1.6 tiny little glass fibers brought the images from Snow World to the patient in the form of photons instead of electrons. And next slide, please. This was, honestly, the nurses were not happy with how big those hoses were in the first system. So we had to come up with a portable system that we could take with us and clean. And here is a picture of the one we ended up with at Shriners Galveston. It was about 10 years later. So this is one that we're currently using in several studies funded by the National Institutes of Health. This is a child getting wound cleaning in the hydro tank room with water nearby. The VR goggles are suspended near the patient's eyes without physically touching the patient. So a lot of these patients with especially large burns often have burns on their face and head that make it challenging to wear a helmet. Also, as you can see here, the patients are often laying on their backs, and the VR helmets are not designed for patients. They're designed for people who are sitting or standing, the conventional ones. So this helmet here, just to give you kind of an idea of how fast things have changed, this helmet was in 2013, we bought the goggles for $35,600. These were military quality goggles. That's how much you had to pay if you wanted a wide field of view goggles. We were going in here to these extremely painful procedures, and we just, brought out the big guns and used the best equipment we could get our hands on. Now you can, as you know, get a similar helmet for $300. So next slide, please. That study at Shriners, despite the challenges and the high pain levels, this recent study, and we showed large reductions in pain and increases in fun with N is 48 burn patients with severe burns averaging 40% burns. Next slide, please. I've also done a number of laboratory pain studies. There was already research showing what parts of the brain became active during pain stimuli. And these are the 5 regions of the brain typically associated with acute pain. This little square thing is a thermal stimulator that's computer controlled to deliver painful but tolerable temperatures that are safe, but you can use them to study pain in the laboratory. Next slide, please. And like the water-friendly system, the magnet is unfriendly to conventional VR goggles. So Jeff Magula and I and Eric Seibel designed this fiber optic system that you could use in a brain scanner. Next slide. Here's a picture of what it looks like from the patient's view. Next slide, please. We showed that during no virtual reality, the patients, these are healthy volunteers, brains lit up like a Christmas tree. And these same people, when they played Snow World during the other part of their brain scan, they showed significant reductions in pain. And you can see the reductions were very large. Usually, for all 5 regions of the brain showed significant reductions, and most of the reductions were 50% or more. Next slide, please. Like Dr. Lewis, I've been very interested in how does VR compare to opioid analgesia. We did a small study with, I think it was 9 volunteers received opioids on one day and no opioids on the other day. And they received VR versus no VR during brain scans. We found the take-home message was VR reduced pain as much as a moderate dose of hydromorphone, and combined VR and opioids reduced pain the most. One thing I found interesting was VR was rated as fun, and the opioids was not. Very low ratings of how fun opioids were. Next slide. So I'm nearing the end of my talk. This is one of the new studies that we just published last or this year, I think, is using eye tracking. So one of the challenges we came up with the severely burned children was a lot of them had bilateral burns of their hands and either didn't want to use the mouse or were unable to use the mouse to interact with Snow World. We've shown in previous laboratory studies that interactivity significantly increases analgesic effectiveness. Wide field of view, we've also isolated as one of the factors. Here we used interactivity with eye movements. Next slide, please. With help from one of my friends from MIT, he created Snow Canyon, and this is kind of like Snow World, but it allows eye tracking. Next slide, please. This is Wired magazine. I thought that was pretty cool how they put the goggles in there like one of the tools of the doctors. Next slide. And we're, like Brandon and many of the other people, VR is getting a lot of attention. Here's an example. It was on the cover of the American Psychological Association monitor last year, September. And next slide, please. And very recently, it was really exciting to have one of our patients in this National Geographic special issue on pain that came out in January 2020. And they subsequently were so interested in our patient that they did a follow-up story solely on our patient, which went in, wildly praised the University of Washington for a number of different medical expertise. So it's a good way to draw positive attention to your hospital. So next slide, please. Here's a picture of me they took, which has a river running through my heart, Snow World. Next slide. And this is thank you to Dr. Lewis. And here's my academic website from the University of Washington. Thank you very much.